Bradt friends, Mario and Luigi here, and we're coming at you with the Star Power winners for now 2 weeks.
Ooh, we have a lot of Star Power winners, so here we go. Kindergarten friends, Cheyenne for Mrs. Zajetski, Camden for Mrs. Zajetski, Arian for Mrs. Bowman, Gavin from Mrs. Bowman, Dimitri for Mrs. Rouse, Santino from Mrs. Rouse, Derek R. for Mrs. Urbanski's, Aubrey from Mrs. Antonini's, Peyton from Mrs. Newman's, Kellen from Mrs. Newman's, Mackay from Mrs. Griesmer's, Zachary from Mrs. Gross, Paige from Mrs. Gross, Luxana from Mrs. Antonini's, Tyrion from Mrs. Griesmer's, Braden from Miss B's, Dakota from Mrs. Winelines, Victoria from Mrs. Winelines, Juliana from Mrs. Pigliavento's, Chase from Mrs. Pigliavento's, Kenise from Mrs. Pace's, Massimo from Mrs. Pace's, and Elena from Miss B's. Great job, kindergartners!
Okay, first grade winners are Mason B. from Mrs. Verano's class, Ava from Mrs. Verano's class, Logan Janice from Mrs. Yates's class, Heather from Mrs. Yates's class, JJ from Mrs. Ferraro's class, Callie from Mrs. Ferraro's class, Greg from Mrs. Hurst's class, Sheepson from Mrs. Hurst's class, Felix from Mrs. Masick's class, Logan from Mrs. Masick's class, James from Mrs. Filarecki's class, Lennon from Mrs. Filarecki's class, Jason from Mrs. Dennis's class, Hannah from Mrs. Dennis's class, Ben Tingling from Mrs. Peleshi's class, Addison from Mrs. Peleshi's class, Sierra P. from Mrs. Shaluti's class, and Sophia K. from Applebus. Good job, first grade.
Nice job. Here we go, second graders. We have Angelina from Mrs. Deo's, Declan from Mrs. McGuire's, Carter from Mrs. McCabe's, Joel from Mrs. Halverson, Skylar from Mrs. Halverson, Aubriana from Mrs. Halverson, Cheyenne from Mrs. Peleshi's, Isabel from Mrs. Peleshi's, Tyler from Mrs. Mosier's, Allie from Mrs. Mosier's, Ariana from Mrs. D'Agostino's, Jaden from Mrs. D'Agostino's, Danelle from Mrs. McDuffie's, Gwen from Mrs. McDuffie's, Lila from Mrs. McCabe's, Haley from Mrs. Deo's, Eva from Mrs. Hackett's, and Aaliyah from Mrs. Hackett's. Great job, second graders!
And class winners are kindergarten Mrs. Newman's class, first grade Mrs. Hurst's class, and second grade Mrs. Peleshi's class. Way to go!
Have a great weekend! Try to get outside and play!
The whole object of the game is to catch the ball, pass it right back to me. Beautiful. Once you catch that ball, pass it right back to me. Wonderful. Catch the ball, pass it back. So, are you ready? Are you ready? Okay, here we go. Hands ready. Here we go. This one's for you. This one's for you. Catch this one right there.
In the morning